Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Craft Beer and Data. I'm Nick Piette, Chief Evangelist here at Talend.
I'm Mark Balkenende, Director of Technical Product Marketing here at Talend.
And we have Willie Trutner of Zuni Brewery. Zuni, that's right. Zuni or Zuni. It'll be a good story to talk about as we kind of go through this.
Sure.
So yeah, hey, this is the last episode we've got for season 1. We're really excited. As you probably noticed, we look less pixelated. And that is largely due to the fact that we've been picked up for season 2. Thank you, Talend, for wanting to do this again next year. Really excited. We're going to be taking this on the road. Going to go to 12 to 14 cities next year. So look forward to those events. There'll be some in-person stuff. You can come meet us. It'd be great. But yeah, so here at Zuni Brewery, which is, I used to live right up the street. So this is a newer brewery to the area.
Yep.
So give us a little background.
So it started out as the Green Garage, or that's what it was when we bought it. And you can see we got a bunch of garage doors in here that worked out great for a brewery. They went out of business. The spot was open. It's obviously a great neighborhood.
Yep.
Lots of young people. Lots of people want to drink craft beer.
That's Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we love the indoor-outdoor space. Keeping these garage doors intact. And it's wintertime now, but in the summertime, when we have all 6 doors open, it's pretty badass in here. And also just incorporates that Colorado feel, Colorado vibe. And
Amen. Yeah. So some of our viewers might be wondering why there's a sword on the table. And so it was really interesting when we were prepping for this, your title here.
Yeah. It's a title that I gave myself, which is the Brew Knight. And the co-founder, but
that's kind of badass too.
Yeah,
Brew
right?
Knight.
Brew Knight.
That actually, funny story behind all that. That kind of came from my days at New Belgium. Shout out to Bo Lytle, who is a legend there. He brewed, and he and I considered ourselves Brew Knights.
Okay.
And we always waited and talked about the day when we could have some squires to do our brewing bidding for us.
Nice.
And we would eventually rise to brew lords. So here I am as a Brew Knight.
Nice.
Sounds like somewhere we have to go visit Nick.
Yeah, right. That's on the list for sure. So about that, right? In the beers that you guys offer here, give us, what was the deciding factor to say these are the beers that we're going to do here?
A lot of it has to do with the beers that I like to drink and that I want to drink. Seasons have to do with a lot of it too, I think. But yeah, so I like to drink beers that I can enjoy, more than one of.
Yeah.
So whether that is a 7 or 8% IPA, or even right now tomorrow I'm releasing a 9.6% Imperial Stout.
Ooh.
Even though that one might only be 1 or 2, it's still a pretty easy drinking, smooth beer. So that's kind of what I strive for, is just beers that everyone can enjoy, beers that I enjoy, beers that, I don't want to just throw in lemongrass and this and that and verbena and all sorts of crazy stuff just because it sounds cool and it can muddle the beer.
Yeah, I noticed you had a nice mix of not just IPAs for this one, and we should have come tomorrow because the Imperial Stout sounds awesome as well.
Should be pretty good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So one of the things that you kind of mentioned even in this, and we were kind of prepping during this, was the data points that you're kind of looking at during the brewing process. So how does data affect brewing?
It affects it in a lot of ways. I mean, you're limited, obviously, in what you can collect data-wise, depending on the equipment you have and whatnot. But when I first got going, as I mentioned, coming from New Belgium and also worked at Bell's, they're big breweries that have, the ability to collect a lot of data. And frankly, a lot of my jobs when I was there was collecting data, whether it's gravities, pHs, cell counts, all sorts of things. So I try to incorporate a lot of that here because all data gives you is just more accurate readings and more accurate understanding of your beer and what the final product will be. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, having tasted a lot of these, I'd love to say that essentially data was crafted these beers, right?
I think it's his skills.
Right, it's definitely the skills.
But he's using the data.
The data helps.
To make it better.
Yeah.
The data certainly helps.
So Of the ones you have on tap today, which one is your favorite? If, essentially all of them are your children, I understand. It's tough to pick a favorite, but...
Well, right now I'm drinking Ameripils, which is, right now that's my favorite.
Okay.
It's a good, I took a German Pilsner yeast and then essentially took the dry hop character, or the dry hop bill of like a pale ale or an IPA. So brewed it entirely all the way like a German Pilsner would be brewed, but then just kind of dry hopped the shit out of it with, can I cuss on this?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
Absolutely. Just dry hop the shit out of it with some American hops. And so that gave it a really nice, fruity, floral characteristic that I really appreciate. That goes well with that crisp, clean German. So.
Yeah. No, that's good. I appreciate it. So essentially, if there's anything else about the brewery that you'd want to mention to our listeners, it's right out here in the heart of the lower highlands of Denver. It's a great location.
Yep.
But if there was one last thing that you'd want our viewers to know about this brewery, what would it be?
Well, I'll give a shout out to our mug club because we're sitting right behind it, or in front of it.
What is that? I was curious when we got here.
Yeah, Mug Club's pretty fun, and this is good for people who are watching because a lot of these memberships are going to renew coming in March. Is that we have 150 mugs back here. It's $100 for the year. We sold out, and I don't know, I think 2 months after being open or something like that. But the great deal is if you are in the Lower Highlands community or if you frequent Zuni Street often, then the deal is it's $100. You get to keep the mug after the year's up. We'll keep the mug here for you. And then each time you come in and get a pour, you get a 20-ounce pour for the price of a 16-ounce pint. So essentially every fifth beer is free, if you think about it.
That's awesome.
So, and you get to drink out of that cool mug. And we also do fun promotions, mug club night and whatnot. So
cool.
Sweet.
So I did have one more question, and so we got to move the sword.
Nick always has one more.
I always have one more question. So this table has a nice little kind of nameplate on it for Devastator.
The Devastator.
So I'm guessing it was probably someone who donated. What's the story behind the Devastator?
The Devastator, I'm going to have to make one up, actually, because I don't know the story behind the Devastator. This was a Kickstarter campaign program that we had, so people could come in and purchase a table and donate to our cause to get this place open. And someone came up with the Devastator, but there are some really good ones out there. One of my favorites is we used to play lacrosse with a guy here in Denver. Yeah. And he named one of the tables the Cherry Creek Indians B Squad, which was the team we were all on, and we were in like 5th grade. So that's a pretty good one. But yeah, there's some good ones out there. There's one that says Australians only because some Australian guy decided to
only Australians consider that one.
Yeah.
Is it usually populated, that table? Or?
No,
I think we have a quest to find out who the Devastator is.
Right, so if you're the Devastator and you're watching this episode, we'd love to hear from you.
Send us a tweet.
It's probably a good story.
Message.
Willie, man, hey, thanks so much for your time.
Cheers.
And again,
thank you.
This is Zuni Street Brewery here in the Lower Highlands of Denver. Thank you very much. And we're back here at Zuni Street Brewery. My name is Nick Piette.
I'm Mark Balkenende.
And today's episode is going to be about net neutrality. Now, I'll preface this by neither one of us are exactly experts in this. We've done as much research as we possibly can, had a lot of conversations. This is something that's very relevant to the current moment right now. And so with that, we're going to try to lay the facts out, right? And as much as we can and try to keep it unbiased as possible. I know that it's very difficult and sometimes.
I'm very biased about everything though, Nick.
I know, Mark.
But before we get started.
Yes.
Our usual order of the day. The big data beer chug.
Yes, the big data chug.
The last two times, I don't think we chugged to anybody. Is there anybody we want?
So the last one, which we had at Twisted Pine, we talked about AWS because it was right before we went to reInvent. So who would you like to toast today?
I don't know. Have we done Snowflake yet?
I think we did an earlier episode, but there's nothing wrong with doing it again.
All right, let's do Snowflake again. I've been doing a lot of work on Snowflake, which is a NoSQL database in the cloud, and I've been working on a new reporting system for Talend in Snowflake, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, now that I've worked with it, I want to toast them again.
Nothing wrong with toasting.
It's a great platform. So
sure. All right. Yeah.
All right.
let's do this.
So
This out of the way.
here's a snowflake.
It's a snowflake.
So we have a few viewers from Talend in the room. Any winners? Clear winners there?
Is it Mark?
Yeah. All right.
I won again.
Getting better there.
So we're going to Ireland at the
Yes.
beginning of the year for a big Talend meeting, and I hear you're going to be up for some training from one of the Irish guys there, my old boss Kieran.
Yep.
Who did a cameo a couple videos ago. So
Yeah, you know.
hopefully the two of you can work some of your kinks out and maybe beat me.
Maybe, you know. Use all the help I can get. All right. So, anyways,
So back to net neutrality.
right, the seriousness of the episode. So, I don't think anyone doesn't know that net neutrality has recently been repealed, right? The FCC basically, in a party line vote, voted 3-2 to basically kill it. Now, a lot of people maybe not necessarily have a lot of the details on like what neutrality really covered, why it was in place. A lot of questions around was it even needed. So I'd like to kick it off where I think some of the things that are most important to a majority of us in the tech space, which is, essentially what net neutrality did was create what they called bright line rules. And it was essentially three main pillars. I cannot block, I cannot throttle, and I cannot provide paid prioritization. That was really meant to ensure that anyone that was on the internet, whether it was a YouTube or grandmascookiesrecipe.com, if I were trying to search both of them, I would be able to get them within the same relative amount of time.
There's also a kind of a fourth provision,
right,
kind of underlying, and that was the right to privacy of your browser data, which we'll talk about later.
Yes.
But I mean, the three things you just highlighted are definitely the three bright lines rules, as you refer to them as. So.
Right, and so a lot of people ask at the very beginning, like, why were these needed even to begin with? And the internet wasn't broken back in 2014 or 15 when these started to come out. But if we remember kind of where it was back then, two interesting cases. First and foremost, back in 2007, Comcast and a couple of the other ISP providers were kind of identified as doing what they call "quote unquote" data discrimination. Now, in this particular case, they were basically restricting and throttling peer-to-peer network or peer-to-peer download tools like BitTorrent, which there's something good and bad about BitTorrent. So there's
you
positive.
haven't drank that much yet, Nick. You can't blame it on that.
There's positive and negatives of blocking something like that, but what it really opened us up to was the fact that, if you think about it, when I'm creating a connection to you, right, and I'm sending information over the internet, what this really shows is that the internet providers have the ability to look in and introspect that packet and identify where it was going, what type of application it's going to connect to.
Right.
So the ability for them to completely block that, it really, I think, opened up a Pandora's box that people started to get worried about. The second thing, which happened in about 2014, was that whole big Netflix issue, right? Where they were identifying that there was some slowness in Netflix usage, and then all of a sudden there was a deal that was struck. Some of that was physical hardware, right? The lines and more direct connects. But essentially, all of a sudden overnight, your ability to connect to Netflix became 65% faster. So there was some kind of level of throttling, paid prioritization that was going on. And really, to ensure that the internet stayed as a free market device, we needed to find a common ground.
Well, the government stepped in to help regulate it.
Right.
Which some people would argue that government regulation is good or bad.
Right.
If you think about how it impacted, say, the airline industry or healthcare, for example, that's going really good. So you think about how having government involved in regulating the internet. And what are some of the plus and minuses of that, right?
Yeah.
And the government is so slow-moving process, which some people would argue is by design,
right?
Because you want things to move slowly with the government rather than so rapidly. But the internet is changing every day, It was only a couple of years ago that net neutrality went in place, and what are some of the things that you feel net neutrality, positive things about net neutrality since it went in?
I mean, I think ultimately the fact that there was no way for anyone to block or throttle, right? I mean,
right.
It's basically kind of like the
fair
freedom
game
of information.
Yeah.
right?
Everybody has the same speed, basically.
Yeah, everyone has the same speed. And what I find really interesting about this is essentially the throttling and paid prioritization. Because when we were talking about this prior to this episode, it was like, those seem like one and the same. And I think the reason why we bring this up is because from an actual infrastructure perspective, when I'm trying to, if I'm a router and I've got information coming from, let's say we're both computers, and I've got it coming from both of us, generally a router is a first in, first out queue. So whatever gets there, I'll process it.
So you're the router?
Yeah, I could be a router and a computer. Maybe both.
Am I the load balancer then?
Yeah, you can be the load balancer. The role playing here is fantastic. No, but in the sense is that once that information has hit the router, I need to figure out how I'm going to process that. And the act of prioritizing data means that you're throttling other data. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's two main protocols, TCP and UDP, that are used for network traffic. Already built into the routers themselves is some level of prioritization. UDP
Absolutely.
protocol takes priority over TCP protocol at the detriment of everything in the TCP pipe. Right?
Yeah, if you say so.
There's a limited number of bandwidth after that because you have a total rate limit, things like that. So when I hear some of these things like, hey, not only are we not going to allow you to throttle, but you can't do paid prioritization, I think that they're talking about the same thing, but for different reasons. Right? I mean, you can certainly throttle without having paid prioritization, but you also can't pay for prioritization, which creates throttling. And I think one of the things that's most interesting is seeing now that the FCC has kind of revoked this, the fact that now we're looking at Congress as a way of trying to distribute this. And so you have both a Republican and a Democratic bill that's coming to play within the next couple weeks. And one of those, the Republican bill, kind of really focuses on preventing throttling and blocking, but it enables paid prioritization, which then means the act of doing that creates throttling.
Yeah, which is odd that they left that out. So, yeah, that's what we were talking about before this, because I thought they're one and the same, and that's where we started talking like, no, they're different, and the Republican bill is actually leaving that part out. So that is crazy how they're doing that. So,
but outside of the outside of the blocking, throttling, and paid prioritization, you mentioned that kind of that right to privacy. And one of the things that's kind of happened with this is now that the net neutrality ruling is gone.
So part of the net neutrality rule was your ISPs had to allow you to opt in or opt out of sharing your browsing data. Right. So you had the ability to say no. Right. Don't share my browsing data with anybody. But now that net neutrality is gone, it's fair game. They can sell all of your history. They can do whatever they want with that. And believe me, those ISPs, they'll take the money from whoever who's willing to pay it, whatever advertiser or marketing company is going to buy that data, because there's a lot of things you can infer from our browsing history. Yeah. And there's some things that I don't want them to defer from my browsing history personally.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good piece to highlight here, which is that you can't just go clear your Google Chrome internet history and be okay.
That's too late.
I know, it's too late.
They're not looking at your browser history. They're looking at what's actually going through your router and your modems and what's running through your house. And even no matter what you do, well, there are things you can do, but no matter what the average person is going to do, you can't hide that, and they're going to sell that to anybody. So.
Yeah, it comes back to
so cheers, drink to that.
The virtue of using that data. Our previous episode where we talked about it. There's going to be an influx of information. Now, some of that might be very beneficial to companies. Others might use it to a negative. Like all of a sudden, we might get a lot more ads in our emails or phone calls or things like that. But
hopefully not mail though.
Right, no mail. But I think one of the things that's interesting now about this is because net neutrality has been repealed, that type of consumer protection now goes to the FTC.
Right.
So,
FCC.
No.
FTC?
Yeah, so FCC was the broadcast. FTC is the Federal Trade Commission.
Right.
And so now...
I just make sure you didn't misstate, man.
Nope, I checked on it because it's an alphabet soup over here.
However, the Republican bill that was just put in, I'm not big, not big on government and politics, but the Republican bill, reading up on this, they did include that back in. Yeah. They do include back in their bill that the ISPs have to continue that privacy opt-in, opt-out.
Which is good, because I mean, we're seeing it all over the board that consumers want privacy and the right to be forgotten.
I don't want my data sold, which, I mean, this is craft beer data, and I know we're touching on, more of a political kind of thing, but it's very much about your data and your access to data, so. Yeah,
no, I mean, it speaks to a really interesting thing, because I was just reading today whether or not this really is relation, or has any relation to the FCC ruling, but most of the ISPs are increasing their costs next year. Now, one could argue that might just be the yearly renewal or things like that. It's coincident that it's at the same time, but one of the things that's really interesting about this, and for better or for worse, is figuring out almost this kind of pay-to-play model, right? I mean, a counterpoint to net neutrality was essentially, hey, a startup has to pay the same amount of money to the internet, or to these ISP providers as Netflix does, which, yes and no. I mean, obviously, one of the big challenges is the physical lines, right, that are there. And I think that's
who owns those?
Right. Well, and it's really interesting because a lot of people are coming from different points from this conversation. You have us, which are very much more focused on kind of like end consumers. I have friends that work in the telecom industry that are more interested in it from the kind of the physically of it, like the lines.
I was also thinking about when you talk about prioritization and who gets the rights the fastest, like how, and of course these are companies with billions and billions of dollars, but how does Amazon and Google and the big platform as a service providers, how are they playing into this? Are they now gunning to get more priority over one over the other so that data transfer to their because ultimately they're only as good as getting data from on-prem applications into their platforms. So are they already gunning for that prioritization of the big pipes, right?
Yeah.
So how does that? I'd love to hear how that's playing out in the background somewhere, but of course we'll never hear about that probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you bring up a really interesting thing, which is I would say a lot of organizations now see the benefit of pushing data into the cloud. It'll be interesting to see how this impacts that. And why I mention that is because essentially, I mean, the internet is unique in the sense that it's kind of a two-lane road where not only am I paying to have access to it, but Amazon, Microsoft, Google are paying to have access to that as well.
Absolutely.
So that data gets charged almost twice, right? To be sent up and to be pulled down. And one of the things that we have seen, a lot of these cloud companies are willing to kind of absorb some of these costs to make it an investment.
Absolutely, it's a huge investment for them. It's their backbone.
Yeah, but I could possibly see, and I hope that this isn't the case, where hey, I see your company wants to push data to AWS. Well, you need to have the AWS package to do that.
Okay.
Right.
But what about the companies that have like all three, Microsoft, Google, and AWS? We recently in our last release we talked about a multi-cloud, and we have a lot of customers that really are multi-cloud. One department's using Amazon, one department's using Google, another department's using Microsoft. And on and on and on. So it's like, as an enterprise, do I have to go out and buy all packages now because I have 5 different departments using all the major,
it's a triple
platform
play.
as a service?
It's your triple play service. We'll cut you at like $8.
It's like my phone, internet, and TV.
Yeah. No.
Great. Thanks, man. That's working out great for me. I'll tell you that right now. My checkbook.
I would say though that what'll be interesting is that as this kind of evolves, what happens from the physical side of things? So. Do I now need, not only are we talking about a Google package, maybe I have a common ISP provider that's providing this for me, but what if all of a sudden now I need to have Google Fiber, Amazon Fiber, and Microsoft Fiber? Right? The physical lines that are kind of bundled together as part of this internet package, we tend to forget that, like, hey,
are you gonna have them all run to your house?
Yeah, maybe, or your company. Maybe all of a sudden I'm going to have, this is my Google line, this is my Amazon line, this is my Microsoft
That's
line.
not nearly as funny.
I know.
To your house would be great.
Yes. Well, I need all the internets as possible.
Yeah.
For or against, this is a really interesting topic of conversation. Because
very controversial.
Yeah. At the core of it, it really just is trying to define what the internet's supposed to be.
It really is. And and how does everybody have access to the internet and the speed of the internet? and how it impacts, not only consumers, but also businesses that are dependent on the internet. So, you talk about Netflix, that's huge. Like, not every business is Netflix or Hulu or whatever, but there's a lot of small, companies that live and die by the internet, and they have to have it. So, are they going to get pushed to the bottom of the stack of the prioritization because all the big guys are consuming those big fibers, like lines that you're talking about? And
it's a finite resource. Those pipes are only so big, right? As Al Gore would say, the internet is a series of tubes.
I was really hoping we'd get through this one without talking about Al Gore. No, but I almost spit the beer out there. Thanks, Nick.
I planned that perfectly.
I really was hoping we'd get through without talking about Al Gore.
Series of tubes. No, but there's only so much bandwidth, which, and one of the things that has come up as a counterpoint.
It's like all those taps back there. You can only get so much beer out at once.
Yeah.
And there's never enough for you.
Never enough for me. Well, a counterpoint to this, and one that has been a concern for many individuals, is the investment that has been happening from an infrastructure perspective of the internet within the United States. The U.S. Telecom survey that they did, there has been a downtick in the amount of money that's been invested in this. Right, it was like $74 billion in 2014. It's kind of slightly gone down a little bit since that. So, it is. You kind of got to find this perfect realm of like, how do we make sure it's still a strategic initiative?
And some people, to that point before we move on, some people would argue that before net neutrality, there was more investment going on in the internet and the infrastructure.
Exactly.
And net neutrality really kind of slowed that down. Mm-hmm. I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago where with Padre on TWIT podcast, but TV. And they are very against taking down net neutrality, but there are a lot of other people in the world, on this issue, or in the U.S. anyway, on this issue that are for a lot of reasons, as well as against it for a lot of reasons. So, we mentioned in the beginning, we're trying to stay neutral on it. So, like you said, it's kind of the investment in the internet and the infrastructure around it has kind of declined, since it started. But there's also a lot of upsides.
Yeah, I
don't want my browser data sold, basically. Browsing data sold.
So much about Mark we learned today. I think whether you're for or against this, I hope that this has been an episode that really at least starts a debate. I think there's a lot of people that are interested. I
don't think we need to start the debate, Nick. I think the debate's alive.
I think the debate is alive, at least for the viewers. It was somewhat informative.
Make people aware, especially people that aren't up, like I was going into this episode, as much up to speed on what was going on in with the debate and net neutrality and what's going on both sides of it. So it's an interesting technological and political problem. And it impacts everybody from the individual consumers to the businesses to small and large, huge businesses aside. So it's really interesting to see what happens and see if some of these bills from the Democrat or Republican side pass or not, and what how that impacts things. So
I think whether you're left, right, blue, red, green, whatever, I think at the end of the day, what are you doing?
Well, you're not drinking.
All right. At the end of the day, I hope we can all agree when it comes to the internet, we want to make sure that we have an open internet where no one can be blocked, no one can be throttled, no one can pay for prioritization.
Absolutely. Cheers to that.
Cheers. All right. Well,
thanks for your beer.
No problem. So thank you for another episode of Craft Beer and Data. We hope this has been informative. We're looking forward to season 2 that's kicking off in January, as Mark mentioned, at the Guinness Factory in Ireland.
That'll be cool.
Yep.
Looking forward to that. Looking forward to chugging some Guinness in Ireland with you.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll have a good one.